Yo, what's up guys? It's Chronicles here with the beginner guide. I highly recommend if you want to see more guides on Chronicles, please follow this channel. It's a growing channel, so let's get the growth going both for the game and for the channel. In this beginner guide, I'm going to talk about everything that you're going to need as a beginner. That is from understanding the base mechanics of the game towards like what kind of resources should you get, what kind of resources should you focus on, what are important things to look at while playing this game, what are the things that help you progress throughout the game, and pretty much most sort of things like that. I'm gonna keep it to a beginner level, so I'm not gonna go too much into depth with like very specific topics. Those will come to different videos. Currently on the release of this video, we are 2 days away from the release of the game. If you're watching this at the release of the game, also find me on twitch.tv/Seijizo. I will be streaming there pretty much daily for the first few days, weeks, months, I don't know how long. If you want to see any content like that or just talk to me, you can hang out in my Discord. That's linked in the description down below as well. Same as the link towards the Twitch channel. So check that out. Hope you enjoy this game. Hope you enjoy this guide. Let's get into it. With this game, you actually have 3 options to play as summoner. You can play Kina, which is a support that has all kinds of like cleanses, buffs, like attack buff, speed buff, all of those kind of things. You have Orbia, which is a mage damage dealer, and you have Cleave, which is a melee tank with all kinds of provokes and that kind of stuff. Orbia is more of a debuffer / damage dealer, as I said. So that is your first choice in the game. If you choose a summoner and you're like later on in the game like, oh, but that's not really what I wanted to play. As you can see here, you can have all 3 characters on one account, and it's actually recommended to play like to a certain extent of the other characters as well, to get extra achievement and crests in. If you choose something and you might later find out it's like not my thing, you can switch later as well. For me personally, I will go for Orbia, which I also played on the US server as you're looking at right now. Would you ask like, okay, which class is best in X, Y, or Z? What we see a lot in PvP is that Cleave is mainly the better one in PvP in most cases. Orbia is pretty good in PvP as well. Kina can still do pretty good in PvP, but I would say she's more of an all-round, whereas the others might be more specific class. But to be honest, I have seen all 3 classes do really well in both PvE, PvP, and pretty much everything. So it kind of depends on what kind of playstyle you like. Would you like to have a damage dealer as a main character and then focus your monsters around you on more tanking roles? Or would you like to be the tank yourself and then have more damage dealers around you? Or would you like to be the support and then have damage dealers and tank in your team? That is kind of the way that you think about like, okay, what is the main role that you want to play within your team? So for me, in this case, I chose the damage dealer, which is Orbia. All of the 3 characters, as I mentioned, are viable for pretty much everything. I would say Orbia is slightly better in PvE maybe. Cleave is slightly better in PvP. Kina is more of an all-rounder. With that, you can maybe make a choice of what you would like to play. So logging into the game, you right away see like a whole bunch of like these exclamation marks. Might feel a little bit overwhelming when you just start playing the game, but pretty much just get through those, and probably at every exclamation mark, there's something that you want to do. Click on, for example, here I have something going on. I can click on it, I can auto run to it if I want to. These are kind of the things that you want to follow. And if you just follow those, like the game is kind of self-explanatory of like, what do you have to do? What happens? What goes around? What comes around? When you start the game will actually let you go through like kind of a tutorial, kind of understand like how the mechanics work, what happens in the game. But let me explain a little bit about it as well. For that, we actually go to a different area. And let me explain what you see here for the main character. So as I said before, I have the main character, which I'm attacking, which is my Orbia. But you can see that I have 3 units around me as well. These 3 units will do their skills automatically. So you can see, for example, if I just auto attack this, you see that the other units start jumping and doing their skills. Except for the unit that is linked. And the linked unit is actually a unit that you can press skills yourself. For example, if I press my E, this unit will give me an attack buff. And I can do that as much as I have mana, as you can see over here. There's specific skills in the game that give you mana regenerate faster, or that drain it more by hitting an enemy, for example. Or there's a bunch of ways to get that. You can also switch your unit of which you want to have as your linked unit. And then I can say like, okay, I want this unit to target specific units. Whereas with just a normal auto attack, these units will start hitting. So with that, you have like a simple understanding like, okay, we have 1 main character, 3 characters around that. Over 1 is soul linked, and the soul linked one, I can use the skills by myself using the mana. And the other skills will be actually used based off a cooldown timer. which units you have selected is something that you can also switch even during mid-battle. And that's simply by saying like, okay, I don't want this unit in, but I want to switch it to a different unit. And I want to put that on a Soul Link, for example. And then I can start using that skill. So that is how easy it is to also switch your units like throughout the game. Besides your units, which have various elements and that counter all elements, you might ask like, okay, how does that work for the summoner? Is it like one specific element per class or something like that? And that is actually not the case. The case in this game is that every summoner has a weapon of every element. So that means I can make my Orbia do dark damage with these skills. If I switch to my dark mode, I can switch it to wind, for example, and I can do wind skills. I can switch it to fire and all kinds of stuff like that. So with that, your main character has all of the elements and you can seemingly switch around with that pretty easily. And you can also see that I have different weapons for that. And by that, it also depends like, okay, how good are your weapons? You can tune them to specific things saying like, okay, my wind weapon is very good in PvP, so I focus more PvP related stats on that. My dark weapon might be very good in PvE. I focus more PvE related stats on that. And that's something you can fine tune that way as well. Another thing which you can do is you can jump, but I've never seen this being useful except for jumping on someone in battle, I guess. And you have dodges. And with those dodges, that is what you have in like most MMOs. You want to dodge like the skills that enemies throw at you and that kind of stuff. And that recharges over time, and then at some point you can dodge again. So that is just in a nutshell, like understanding the mechanics of the game. Once you start this game, I highly recommend you to focus on one specific thing, which is the questline, and then the Rahil Kingdom story questline. These have a whole bunch of chapters which give a lot of good rewards. You can also already start doing like other quests, like for example, the area exploration, but I won't focus too much on that if I were you. Mainly focus on this Rahil Kingdom story because that gives you the best rewards you can get pretty much. And that will also give you like the first few weapons, a few of the monsters it will tell you to make, all kinds of things like that. The moment you say like, okay, the units are too strong, I cannot progress towards the next chapter, then it's recommended to check, for example, the area exploration, do a few quests in there, get some extra power, and then go towards the next stage. That also comes to the next thing, which is in this game you have certain team power. And your team power is a calculation of like how strong your team would be. If I switch my weapons, which I did before, you can actually see that my team power goes up and down depending on what weapon I equip has different stats. The same thing is if I switch a unit out, you can see that I increase my power, and that is because certain units have equipments or not. If we go to a monster, for example, we can actually see how that power is looking like. So in the case of Sky Arena, might you be familiar with Sky Arena, you could say like, okay, the monster power is pretty much just the runes. Maybe the skill ups a little bit. In this game, it's actually pretty different. You have a whole bunch of things that actually value towards the power of a certain unit. And that is something that I will talk a little bit more about in a later video. But just to have like a brief idea, like, okay, there's multiple ways to get power, to increase your power. Might you be stuck at some of the stages? It could be because of the following thing. If I go into a certain stage, let's say I do this tower, I go into this stage, it will actually tell me that, okay, I have way too little power for what the enemy power is, and therefore I will have a hard penalty. And that hard penalty also shows me like, okay, these units will do a lot more damage to me and I don't do as much damage to them, which is shown over here. So if I put my normal team in there, it still shows me that I have a 50% penalty, which is too much to clear these stages. For example, if I do one stage lower, which I cleared before, if I select my good team on that, you can see that I have a hard penalty of 25, and 25 for me is doable on this stage. It is also possible to say like, okay, you overpower a certain stage, as I do, for example, in the normal tower, then you actually have a bonus. So if I unselect and select the unit, you see that I have 25% extra damage that I dealt and taken. That is also 25% damage less. Having higher team power is definitely something you want to focus on because it just makes a lot of these stages a lot easier. Does power necessarily translate that if you have higher power than someone else you play in PvP that you're going to win? Not exactly. Because you can have more efficient stats than the enemy or a specific team that counters the enemy, and therefore power doesn't mean all too much for that specific thing, but there's still certain ways that higher power does benefit quite a lot. A simple example is if we go to Arena, and in Arena, we get the rewards from last week. I register my team on defense. And as you can see here, there's a whole bunch of people that I can hit on defense as well. If I challenge someone and I highly outpower them, rather than actually having to do the battle, I can do a quick battle and instantly win. So that is something you want to have that high power for as well, because in this case, I have way higher power than most of these people because the ranks just got reset. And it's very easy to do all of my wings this way. But at some point you get to a point that you actually have to play your opponent. And that's also something in this game in general. There's a good combination of things that go automatically. Like, for example, these players are farming here automatically. I can press the M button and my character will start searching for monsters and it starts clearing them automatically. There's a bunch of things that go automatically, for example, like questing. But you also have specific dungeons you have to do manually. And I think there's a good combination between both of them in this game, especially like towards the more end raids, PvP, you play manual, and all of the other things that are more of like the grinding kind of things, you can all play on auto, pretty much, except for mining, but they're actually adding that in as well. So talking a little bit more about the summoner. The summoner doesn't have runes, but it has certain equipments. As I talked about earlier, it has the equipments for every element as the weapon, and then also accessories and those kinds. In the early game, you're not going to focus too much on these. You don't have to mind them too much. You can just use the weapons that you get from the story questline, maybe up them a little bit, but I wouldn't even focus too much on upping those things because the resources, especially sky stones, you got to remember that one, can be a tricky resource and you don't really want to waste that all too much. Same for resources on the runes. You don't want to start wasting too many resources on the runes because they also cost sky stones. These are relatively more easy to get, so if you waste a bunch of those, it's not as important. But you also have to keep in mind that everything you do in this game costs gold. And gold is a resource that's very useful and you're going to need quite a lot of. So in that case, I wouldn't recommend to start like heavily spending all of that as well. If you're stuck at a certain point for a chapter, use some of the resources to improve, but I wouldn't say like necessarily super overpower things in the early stage because you might be wasting some resources here and there. Besides the summoner having specific weapons and all of those kind of things, each summoner also has skills. And with those skills, I showed before, like if I am in a certain element, my skill will do a certain defense buff or a defense break or like anything like that. And that's what you can all see over here. This can go pretty in depth of like, okay, what is good and all of those kind of things. In the early game, you don't have to mind it too much because you're actually free to reset your skill points at any given time. There are a bunch of different skills for all of the three summoners, but in the case of Orbia, which I'm most familiar with, you can see that you have the weapon skills here on the left. You have like elemental boosting damage here on the top. You have specific passives on the right side and on the bottom sides, which is linked to those specific utilities. Utilities, there are a few very useful ones. For example, getting like multiple evasions, which is highly recommended to do. Getting your faster recharges of evasions. And also getting more mana, getting mana faster. All of those kind of things are very important. And that is what I highly recommend you to focus on in the early game. There's also a bunch of things that are more PvP related. For example, like in PvP, you can change your weapon. Don't really focus on those too much. They don't really add. An important factor with this is get the skill ups in things that are cheap. For example, if this one is going to cost you 6, but another one is going to cost you 1, rather spend a few of those things costing 1, and then later on check those things that cost 6. So yeah, the useful ones are more dodges. Those are over there. Then you have extra mana, extra mana, extra mana. Those 3 are very important. And another one, which I didn't level that much when I started playing this game, which I found out later, and that's changing your soul link unit with a lower cooldown. And that is very useful if you want to do specific switches with your units, but that is somewhat more advanced as well, which we'll talk more about in a later video too. So those are the first few skills to focus on. Mainly the mana things, the dodging things, and buy everything that's cheap. Because it's better to up everything a little bit that's cheap, rather than going for like super expensive ones, like right away trying like, oh, I need 80 of those for this higher level, but it's a good skill. Yeah, it's a good skill, but it's too expensive. Rather buy 10 different things that are worse individually, but the 10 combined is probably 5 times better than just buying this one, for example. So then let's talk about the monsters specifically. We have a bunch of tabs over here on the left, which we can go through. First one is Awakening. Let's select the unit that I do not have awakened yet. For example, the Water Polar Queen. As you can see here, with certain awakenings, I will get extra power and also different stats. And at the moment of a 5 awakening, you will get a skill increase in most cases. And in the case of a 5-star, you will get a ultimate skill. This is different than Sky Arena because you have multiple awakening. And you can even see, let's see if I have a unit that is 10 already. It goes from 10 and then to 15. And do I have one that has 15? Yeah, this is one that's working from 11 to 15. And the resources that you need are essences, which I will show in a second where you get them from. But also you have specific stages where it asks you to use a duplicate of that unit. And it has to be a duplicate from exactly the same family and the same element. Whereas if you want to do skill ups, for example, which I'll show in a second as well, you can do from all of that same family. So for that case, it is more interesting in this game to get duplicates. But also the summon rates in this game are a lot easier. You have pity systems, you have all kinds of things like that, which I'll show in a later moment as well. All of that will help you to get those duplicates easier and actually make your units all the way to 15 Awakening. And 15 Awakening is actually a pretty good increase because you can see here going from 13 Awakening to 15 Awakening increases the base stats by quite some already. So to talk about where do you get those resources, in the case of essences, both water and magic, you will get those from the Kairos. In Kairos, you can have like the respected elements that you want to get the essence from or the ones that are from magic. And that's just clearing this unit. You have a bunch of times that you can entry this, but once you're out of entries, you can actually use your crystals, which is a resource that's used throughout the game to get more entries in most cases. And especially in the early days of this game, it's highly recommended to use those crystals to get those extra entries and actually get your units awakened by that. Then the next thing that you need is Breath of Life. And Breath of Life is something that a lot of people might slightly struggle to come by, because you're given some by the quests, but at some point you might be like, okay, but where do you exactly get those Breath of Life? Easiest way to get the Breath of Life is the exchange pieces. For me personally, I think the exchange pieces of 3 stars and 2 stars are probably the best way to go, in which you want to select, okay, I want to get Breath of Lives, and then I want to select the specific units. So we want to get maximum amount, for example, and then we want to feed in all of those things to actually get Breath of Lives this way. That is probably the best way to do. You do have to keep in mind that you're feeding away 3 stars like they're pieces. So you cannot use them for awakenings, you cannot use them for skill ups anymore if you feed them in here. So it's important to check like, okay, which units do I maybe want to build, maybe not want to build, and you feed in, of course, the ones you don't want to build. I'll make a later video on which 3 stars are useful, so you try to avoid using the pieces for those units. Same for the 2 stars, but actually for 2 stars, not too many of those units are actually that useful. So most of the 2 stars you can just straight away feed in there. You cannot really go wrong on that much. That is pretty much most things for the awakening. And as mentioned before, on the 4 to 5 awakening, it will also change the name, and then it will also get specific skills. So in this case, let's say I would awaken my Ifrit all the way to 5 star. I will get Theomars, and then you also see the animation of like, okay, you awakened your Ifrit into a Theomars. And therefore, I also get the specific skills that are added to it. Next thing we can see is Evolve. Evolve is where you can up the threshold of what the max level is of that unit. In this case, it will take Rainbow Mons, or it takes copies of that unit. I highly recommend to go for a Rainbow Mons. As in Sky Arena, you have like specific Rainbow Mons for specific levels. In here, you have as well 5-star Rainbow Mons only work for 5 stars, 4-star for 4-star, etc. So in this case, would I like to say like, okay, I want to put all of those in. Yes, I want to be able to max my Theomars. So my Theomars is currently level 50 out of 70, so it doesn't up the level right away. I actually have to do level up, which is a different material. We can auto-select those and make Theomars level 70. So first things first, we were using the Rainbow Mons. Where are you going to get your Rainbow Mons? The best place, and you get a bunch of those things, you can ignore those, we don't need those. The best place to get your Rainbow Mons in early game is if you click through the guard journal, you go to area dungeon, and within the area dungeon, you're going to see a whole bunch of stages from every region you can play, and those regions all give like 3-star on this level, 4-star on this level, and 5-star on this level. And that's going to give you a good amount of Rainbow Mons to max out at least the first few units that you want to focus on. You might ask which units do you recommend to focus on. I talk about that a little bit later as well. The other material that I showed before for leveling up the units is something different, which are these potions. I'm not even sure what they exactly are. So you can use those to level up, or you can use Angel Mons to level them up. You will get a lot of those throughout the story quest, but might you be short on those? A good place to get them is Path of Growth, and then Path of Training. And then from Path of Training, you can see like the higher level you do, the more of these XP potions you get, and that will help you towards your leveling. Something that I haven't talked about is the skill ups. Skill ups in this game are very important, and let me actually show you a unit that's not skilled up that much. So if you want to skill up a unit, we can use either one of two materials. So one material would be Devilmons to skill them up, or you can use copies of the units, and that could also be in different families. In the most case, for 5 stars, you do want to use those Devilmons. If we actually look at the skill info, we can also see what is the extra added damage towards skill ups. And as you can see, going from 100% damage to 165 damage on the first skill, that's already quite a big increase. But if you check, for example, for a skill 1 or a skill 2, so in this case, let's go for Bastet and we check out the shield, or we check out the attack up. We have an attack up level 2 for 10 seconds. If we max this thing, it's 20 seconds. And also, if you check the shield, it goes from 15 for 7 seconds to 22 from max HP for 14 seconds. So those are really big improvements that I would say, like, okay, these are important things to get. So therefore, Devilmons is a very important resource you don't really want to waste on units you're not going to build that much. But for the case of 4 stars, you also have 4-star Devilmons in this game. I'm not entirely sure which patch we will be on during the release of the global launch, but those 4-star Devilmons are relatively easy to come by, they're not that expensive, and they're a really good way to make your 4 stars into max skilled, and that is very recommended to focus on. Focusing on net 5s early on is pretty difficult because you lack those resources, for example, Devilmons, the Rainbow Mons, and all of that kind of good stuff to actually use that unit with the highest potential. Plus there's another fact which I can show over here. If I want to make a 4-star unit into an Awakening, it will cost me close to 70k. If I want to do that for a 5-star, it will cost me more than double. So the resources, also what you can see for essences and that kind of stuff, is a lot more on the 5 stars. So therefore, everyone, including me, will recommend you to focus on 3 stars early game. And from there on, you're going to transition to 4 stars and 5 stars and so on. Would you say at some points like, ooh, I don't really like that unit anymore, and the resource that I used into it are kind of wasted, I'm not using that unit anymore? You have the possibility of restoring a unit. You have certain restore stones. You get those from, like, for example, TOA. And you get back all of the material that you placed into that unit. Including, for example, if I have a unit where I use Devilmons in, you get back all of those Devilmons or the specific pieces, anything like that. Super nice feature. We need that in Sky Arena. And that is pretty much all for units, except for the part which units to focus on and where do you actually get the units. So in this game, first of all, getting the units, that is from the Summon Altar. And from the Summon Altar, you have like specific banners with your pity system where you can do certain summons on. You can summon for crystals, but I highly discourage you to do that. I recommend you to use scrolls for summons and use those crystals for refreshes to get extra material from specific dungeons that you would like to do. So in this case, I only have one mystical scroll in which we can summon. We can see that we get a certain unit. If you already have that unit, it will turn into those pieces as I talked before for Breath of Life, or you can use them for copies or skill ups. Every time I do a summon, you see that I have one extra portion of a legendary scroll. Every time that I summon a legendary scroll, I get a portion for a transcendent scroll. So that way you always get some rewards, even if you're actually not really getting that much. You have those specific banners, which are very good to do. Those are mostly on a time frame that for a specific event. But another very nice thing is if you're not summoning by banner, you have this Altar's Blessing. The Altar's Blessing actually allows you to put units that you already own in the Blessing. And once you summon a net 5, it has a way higher chance of getting those specific units again. In my case, I have the Dark Polar Queen. I can place the Dark Polar Queen in here and actually have a higher chance of getting that unit through a normal scroll. And that is also something interesting to mention. In this game, you have a 1% chance to get a net 5. But as you can see, there's also a very slight percent chance to get an LD5 from a normal mystical scroll. So all of your mystical scrolls actually become pretty interesting by that as well. On top of that, if we look at the unknown scrolls have possibilities of 1% to get a 4-star. So your unknown scrolls are very good in this game as well. Plus the unknown scrolls have the possibilities of getting a 4-star LD unit. So that makes it very interesting to summon these unknown scrolls for. Another thing that makes it very interesting to get duplicates in this game, let's say we summon a bunch of those. Let's just go through it pretty quick. So we summoned a bunch of units. Everything are duplicates because you can only have one copy of the unit in the game. But summoning all of those duplicates is actually very useful. If you go to your book, which contains all of the units that you have, you see a bunch of those exclamation marks over here. In this case, I only have one. If I claim all of that, we see that my power increased. And that is because I increased the Harpy in this case. I think it was over here. And you can see every time that I have an X amount of the copies of Harpy, I will get for all of my fire units extra HP bonus. And for that reason, it's very useful, and you have like more horizontal progression of summoning as many units as you would like. If you check the 4 stars and 5 stars, they will actually have a buff that goes towards that specific unit itself. It's not global for all fire units, but it is for that unit itself. For example, my Karambit is pretty high, and then you can see that it adds certain attack speed to it, which is a very nice thing. So that is for the most part about units. Which units do I recommend you to focus on? I will make a separate video on which units to exactly focus on begin game, but something that I can already say is that Iselia, which is the Fire Fairy, is a very good damage dealer. You would probably want to focus on Shannon, which I actually refunded because I don't use it anymore, but the Wind Pixie, also a very good unit, and Konomiya, the Water Garuda. Those 3 units will actually get you through pretty much the whole storyline, and most likely pretty much quite some further as well. Those 3 are very easy to get, easy to fund, good units to get you through the early game. Next topic is going to be runes. Runes is something you don't have to focus on too much in the early game, but you're going to get at a point where you want to focus on those runes. There are a bunch of stages within the quest line that actually gives runes. If I'm not mistaken, some of these area dungeons also give quite decent runes, and those runes are probably good enough to do like the early game with. If you want to be specific and want to focus more on runes, then you go to Path of Growth, Path of Adventure, and within Path of Adventure you have the specific dungeons, and you can see what dungeons give which runes. More than that, I'm not going to focus too much into runes for this beginner guide, but something I really recommend you to check out, and I really recommend you to do, is if you go to runes, you have certain presets. And presets you can save yourself, you can also buy more presets, and it makes it very easy to say like, okay, I want this whole set, I want to have the Despair set on Bastet, and that's now loaded in. And then I go to Karambit, for example, and I want to select the old Bastet set, which is the triple energy, which I saved over here, and I want to load that in, and we can right away see like the changes in the stats. And that's very easy to switch runes that way. There is no cost or fee for switching runes in this game, so that makes it very nice. So that is most things for runes, the summoner, the monsters. I already mentioned what is interesting to focus on, which is your storyline. Also always make sure that you check out the dailies, you do your dailies. You have certain events going on, check out those events, claim those things from those events. Sometimes they end up over here, so you have to check like, okay, what kind of things do I get over here as well? You want to claim all of those, good rewards from that as well. So it's, in the early stages, actually very recommended. Everywhere where you see an exclamation mark, you probably want to click on it. You probably want to check it out, like probably you get some rewards over there. And you want to focus on these things. So that will definitely get you through the first few days, probably even weeks of this game. Two more small things that I want to mention is, for example, what would you like to do when you're AFKing this game? Because you have a bunch of things that you can do automatically. As you can see over here, I'm automatically just letting my characters walk around and actually kill things. Slight tip, you can see that this area is pretty busy. If we click on the minimap, we also have the possibilities of changing a channel. That is very recommended to change the channel wherever your farming is too busy. Because here I have all the units to myself, and that's 10 times better. Very good tip. But why are you farming those monsters? You have specific things that you can get from them. Like you get a slightly bit of gold. But what becomes more interesting is if we go to the book over here. And then we go to the creature book. And within the creature book, we can actually see that we can kill all of those units multiple times and get certain tier of rewards. What do you get? If you go to the bosses, you can actually get crystals from it, which you can use for refreshes, but you can also get a mystical scroll from it. And you get sky stones from these as well for the first kill. But as you can see over here, you also get rewards from just killing the smaller units, which is very recommended to do when you're AFKing, not looking at your phone, or these kind of things. There's also certain quests that are repeat quests, which will also do those killing of those units, but you use certain tickets, and those tickets then be translated towards different items. Might you ask, what are the most useful things to do here? I highly recommend you to not waste your tickets too much in the early game, because as you can see here, you get like way less rewards than what you get from like higher stages higher up. So I recommend you to kind of wait until you're maybe level 49 or maybe 55, because those are the interesting things to get. Might you ask, like, okay, I see a whole bunch of things over here. What is useful to get? The 49 one is pretty useful because you get unknown scrolls and you get gold, and gold is always very useful. The first one is some secret dungeon. You can get some units from there, but that is more niche. Wouldn't really focus on that too much early on. Getting the XP potions, I don't think is that useful as well. This one will give you some monster pieces. I don't really recommend that too. If you want to focus on arena, you want to get more tickets for that, this one is pretty nice. But mostly I like to do this one because it gives you additional tickets to Path of Growth. And Path of Growth helps you to get more runes or more XP or something for your professions, which I'll talk about in a second as well. You get Unknown Scrolls and you get Breath of Lives. Breath of Lives are also very useful to get those monster, so you don't have to exchange for the monster pieces, but you get Breath of Lives right away. And then you have the last one, which is for dungeon tickets. That's your essences, so that's one is also pretty useful. And you get specific ball of wool kind of things in which you can craft outfits if you like. But I will talk about it in a separate video. But you can have like certain, just as a sneak peek, you have like certain outfits. You can craft those outfits and you would use those things for it. So another thing that you can do AFK is fishing. Fishing goes pretty easily. You buy certain bait. You can click on what kind of fish you want to fish for. So for example, this fish, we could say like, okay, I want it to go to that area for fishing that specific thing. That actually works for pretty much everything in this game. It will automatically move your character to it. If you say like, okay, a quest popped up, move to that quest. If a certain resource that you need to get, you need to mine like mithril, for example, you can click on it. You can say like, okay, I want to walk to this mithril spot. So in this case, it's very nicely just walking to that fishing spot. And I can say like, okay, start fishing. With my account level, I can throw like 4 fishing rods down there. And with those fishing rods, it just starts automatically fishing. And you don't even have to do anything. And you can get some good materials with that as well, which is used for professions. Talking a little bit about professions. Professions is something I wouldn't really focus on too much in the early game. But it is useful to know what is out there. So I'm just going to talk about that. We have 4 professions. The first one is processing. Processing is something that you can make ores into bars, for example, in here. So we have mithril ores, and we make them into a mithril bar, or whatever you want to call it in this game. And you can use those materials to craft something. Then you could have alchemy, and alchemy is all kinds of power-ups for your weapons, your runes, and those kind of things, combined with like actually creating runes, and also creating scrolls if you would like, and also getting skill-ups for your summoner. Then you have cooking. Cooking is something I haven't used that much personally, but cooking is something that you can have. You can get certain food, and that certain food has a attack buff or a crit rate buff or all kinds of buffs that you can have for like having that food. You can also create potions that way and a bunch of other things. Then I guess the most important one is blacksmith. And blacksmith is something more towards the end game, and that's why you want to upgrade your weapons. For example, if you do a certain raid, you will get this weapon. You want to upgrade it to this weapon with these materials. Then you have the next weapon. You go a step further and you go a step further. And therefore you can upgrade your weapon to a higher tier and get one of the best weapons in the game. But I will make a separate video on professions because I think you can go very in depth with that. This video is already very long, but I think those are the most important things to address for this game. There's a lot of knowledge going into this game. I don't want to make these videos too long. This one is already pretty lengthy. I hope you enjoy. I hope you made it all the way through. I hope you enjoyed this game as well. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, if there's any questions, please put them in the comments down below, or just simply go to my Twitch if I'm live, or on my Discord. You can ask any questions there. Community will help you out, I will help you out, and let's see each other in game. Guys, thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next one.